Everyone, we're going to start this quarter's Patriot lunch, highlighting U.S. Army Colonel Chris Kirk. My name is Will Marm. I'm a Army Special Forces veteran, a proud graduate of Bancroft Capital's premier veteran training program. Welcome to this quarter's Patriot lunch. Chris, welcome. Thank you for dialoguing with us today.
Thanks, Will. Great to be here, man.
Yeah, absolutely. With this Patriot lunch, we are trying to build relationships. We're building relationships and we succeed when they're made and they're strengthened. I'll connect you later with Chris after this webinar, and I encourage all the audience members to reach out or he'll reach out, and it'd be great for you guys to understand where he comes from and for him to understand your roles and places in the industry and see where he fits for this next season of his life. He's transitioning. We'll get into his story and his mission. But first, most of you know about Bancroft Capital's special mission. We are a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business operating as an institutional broker-dealer and a small investment bank. Through our best-in-class veteran training program, we accomplish our mission which our mission is to train and empower transitioning veterans to succeed in the financial services industry. I went through that. I got my licensing. It's a really wonderful training program. Bancroft Capital takes the proceeds of their business to pay for their mission, and their core lines of business are cash management, public finance, fixed income, debt and equity capital markets, secondary trade desk, and an investment bank, small investment banking. So please remember Bancroft Capital if you ever need these services. I'd like to say also, Chris comes to us in partnership with the Special Operators Transition Foundation. That is a nonprofit committed to helping special operators transition into their next great career in corporate America. They've got a deep pipeline of quality talent like Chris, and they're great Americans who are transitioning into your space, and your organization should want these guys and gals to come in and help out. So look at sotf.org and let us know if you want an introduction. So Chris, over to you. You're a transitioning Army Special Operations aviator, 25 years. Give us an overview of yourself. Tell us your career a little bit.
Thanks, Will, and yeah, thanks again to you and to Bancroft for doing this. I think this is an awesome event. And again, I'm honored to be part of it and appreciate the opportunity. As you mentioned, yeah, 25-year, retiring here in 8 days. I did have my retirement ceremony last week, but my actual retirement date's at the end of the month. Of course, I grew up in the St. Louis, Missouri area. For anyone who's familiar with the Midwest, came from a large family of 7 kids. I jokingly say, growing up there, I know I can't, I have 3 of my own. I don't know how anybody could afford 7. And I think a lot of people on this Zoom can probably attest to that as well. But anyway, went to West Point, played baseball there, tried out for hockey, wasn't good enough, but ended up playing baseball. Then graduated, became an aviation officer, Black Hawk helicopter pilot. Slew of assignments there, and then obviously transitioned to special operations. So and retiring here out of the Joint Special Operations Command at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, now known as Fort Liberty.
Yeah, wow, that's great. 7 kids, multi-sport athlete. What I want to highlight for the audience is that you weren't recruited to play D1 baseball.
That's a good point. You're correct. I was not.
Is that right?
I was actually.
All right, okay.
I was recruited to play football because I was a quarterback. But then I think West Point finally looked at my film and saw that I threw the ball more than I ran the ball, which is not what West Point does. So yeah, I walked onto the baseball team, played JV for 2 years, and actually thought my career was over. And got an invite to go out to the varsity tryouts. And like many people who've been in a situation where maybe they're questioning their confidence, I didn't have the best tryout. I couldn't throw the ball back to the pitcher. I might have shared that with you. I had a mental block, but I could hit the ball well. And the coach actually said, "You're lucky you could hit the ball well." So I went from not being able to throw the ball back to the pitcher to becoming the starting catcher by the end of that junior year. and on a team that won a pretty big championship game. So yeah, it took a little bit of work, and I never gave up, and I will always look for the opportunities to continue to improve and progress and learn from people that were in the positions I wanted to be in.
Yeah, wonderful, Chris. That's those are skill sets that directly translate, right? Keep trying, perseverance. Uh, sometimes you fail, but you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep driving forward in the right direction. And there's, as many of us know, there's no greater way to prepare for the struggles of life, let alone combat, which we'll get into later, but the struggles of life than to practice that on the field of friendly strife. And there's a lot of great quotes like that, right? As we can probably spout that off on, required memory. But the field there. So you played hockey too, is that right? I know we got some good hockey players on the audience as well.
Yeah. Like I said, and I might have relayed to you when we were talking before that I did try out for the hockey team, and I tried out based on what I thought was a shorter line of cadets trying out. So I did a quick math in my head and figured my chances were better. What I didn't factor into that was that you actually had to have some skill. So to play D1 hockey, and I had a little bit, but not enough anyway. But yeah, I mean, you're right. To your point, and I've carried that along to my children as well, that hey, there's going to be times where you don't get picked, but it doesn't mean that you just give up, right? That you keep trying, you find a different goal, you adjust your goal, but you persevere. And again, I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to stop trying just because I wasn't selected for the hockey team. I really wanted to play sports at West Point for a couple reasons, as you can imagine. One motivation might have been not to have to parade as much as some of the other cadets. But I also just wanted to play collegiate athletics, and I really love baseball. So that's why I transitioned and tried out for the baseball team.
That's great. Yeah, I think Cal has a question. If one of your wins in baseball were against Navy, is that right or no?
Oh, of course, yeah, yeah. And I don't remember who we played in the championship that junior year. I think it might have been Bucknell, but I do know that just recently Army beat Navy. The Army baseball team just beat Navy, and sorry to all the Navy people that I'm sure are on this call, but yeah, that they won for the sixth in a row, the sixth Patriot League championship in a row, and they toppled Navy just this past weekend.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I never played baseball. I can barely relate. I stopped watching the Phillies right before they started winning.
Yeah.
So let's get into piloting and aviation and your esteemed and distinguished career. You didn't fly just one helicopter. Can you talk us through all the different airframes?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I think 6 different aircraft when I added it up. Some of them are different versions of the same helicopter, whether it's a different model. But when I started out in Blackhawks, obviously when you go to flight school, you start out with the whatever model of helicopter they're using to beat up down at Fort Rucker, because those aircraft do get beat up pretty bad. I was one of them to beat them up pretty bad. But started out in what would be called the OH-58, the little scout helicopter, and then yeah, advanced to the Blackhawk. And when I eventually assessed and was selected for the 160th, I thought I was assessing to become a Blackhawk pilot or be in the Blackhawk organizations, but they were growing their Chinook units. So they asked me what I thought, and I said, I'll fly whatever you need me to fly. And I think that's also one of those things, like being part of and I think they even jokingly said, would you fly a desk? And I said, I have more time behind a desk than I have anywhere else. So point being is I was happy to be part of the organization, and wherever I could chip in and help, I was gonna do that. And yeah, so I have about, out of most of my hours, half probably in the Blackhawk and half are in the Chinook. And they're pretty much used for the same mission, which is the assault mission. And that's what appealed to me the most.
Yeah, that's neat. Chinook, huge plane, helicopter. What do we call it, a plane? I mean, it's an aircraft, but
Yeah, we call it an aircraft, but yeah, helicopters probably, yeah.
it's like boats and ships. They're not boats, they're ships.
There you go. Yeah. I know
Um,
what you're getting at though.
yeah, sure. So you uh fastest helicopter, give us some quick stats on it. counter
Yeah,
rotation blades going this way,
yeah.
super
You're hitting the
fast.
nail on the head. Yeah. So whoever developed that thing, and quick history is it was actually developed to carry Nike missiles. So that's why we created it many years ago. Post Korean War, and it's been around since, right? And it hasn't changed much. So if you think about the big box, the fuselage, that could fit a Nike missile in it, and that was the primary mission. And then we looked at it and said, well, you know what, we could put a lot of people in there, and so
Mhm.
that's what they started to do, right? And again, you can carry a lot of things, you can sling load a lot of things. It is the fastest helicopter because it has the most power. It can shake you to death though, and if you have some loose fillings, those fillings are probably going to pop out if you get up to about probably 150, 170. And not many of us have seen that in a Chinook because of how much it vibrates you. But yeah, very powerful, very capable helicopter. Just need a little bit of a bigger landing area to land in, right?
Okay, for the record, did you say 150, 170? Like
Yeah, yeah,
what?
somewhere
Like
up
what's
there.
that mean? What in English?
No, it's not. Yeah, so knots, which is probably close to about 180, 190, almost
Oh,
200 miles an hour. Yeah,
oh, that's fast.
it is. It is. But again, you're probably not. You're not usually going that fast in the Chinook just because of the vibration. So, um, yeah. But yeah, when like our cruise speed was 120 knots, which is again probably about 140 miles an hour. And
Good.
sometimes you're close to the ground. You're pretty low doing that, depending on what you're trying to do. And yeah, those trees can be going by pretty fast for sure.
Yeah, right. So recapping, you went to West Point, you did a career, you started off in aviation, and decided to raise your hand for the best of the best, the Night Stalkers, right? The 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Um, Best in the world. Talk us through Night Stalkers, mission, what you did, not what you did, but we'll get into that. But what makes the Night Stalkers so special?
Yeah, thank you for that. So and probably some are familiar, but for people who aren't, I use some popular analogies or what I think are. It's the I like to think of it as the most elite helicopter unit. It is in the military, in the U.S. military, and sort of by de facto in the world. Uh, it is designed and it's purpose built to support the most elite special operations forces in our military, and again, by extension, some of our allies. We've certainly been able to fly some of our allies' elite special operations forces. And it was created. If the dawn of it was from the failed Iran hostage rescue attempt, and we realized we need, because we cobbled together helicopter pilots and crews from the Air Force, from the Marines, to support that mission. And when they did the findings and looked into it, they found, hey, if we had a unit that just did this, it would have been much more capable. I'm not disparaging anybody that was on the mission. It was a super difficult mission. It could have ended up in the same way if the 160th was around. It might have reduced the chances, and they needed a unit that was solely focused on that. So they created the regiment, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. It's grown over the years. But again, we like to pride, we call ourselves the Night Stalkers. Our motto is Night Stalkers Don't Quit. You might hear, abbreviated as NSDQ. And that's the mentality. The mentality, I've mentioned it to you before. It's a fanatical obsession to accomplish the mission, no matter what. And another one of our mottos is plus or minus 30 seconds anywhere in the world, on time, on target, anywhere in the world. So, if you're ever talking to a Night Stalker, you might want to be on time because we freak out about being on time. But again, fanatical, and just bend over backwards to support the mission, which, by the way, is customer focused, right? So we don't do anything without thinking about our customer, if that all makes sense.
Obviously, the engagement with the client, having had several opportunities to fly on your ships. Not I don't think the Chinooks, Blackhawks, but the customer engagement and the collaborative planning it's a hallmark. And then when in that collaboration, the expertise are right off the top of the head. Hey, I can do this, I can do that. I gotta have to refuel here. Gonna have to land here. I can pick you up at this time. You've got how much time on station, that type of thing. All that, like obviously knowledge coming from the head, but then go back, hit the books, plot the charts, routes, do all the math. Very professional, very professional. Tell me what is the big deal about plus or minus 30 seconds? Like, what does that mean to the audience, to the people that are listening? What why is
Yeah,
that such a
no,
question?
thank you for that. It means a couple things, right? First and foremost is that most everything that we do requires a level of precision that if we don't meet that level of precision, it could, and I'm not being, it could mean death, right? It could certainly mean mission failure, but the worst thing that could happen is someone could die or get seriously injured because we're trying to synchronize so many things. We're trying to synchronize whether or not we need aerial refuel, and we have flying gas stations that we need to link up with. There might be artillery fire that's being pre-planned to to take out enemy air-to-air weapon systems. If we're too early, obviously the artillery doesn't achieve its effect, and now we're getting shot at by air-to-air weapon systems. So I think it's that, right? It's because we have to be so precise in this business because of all the things that have to line up. But two, it's a standard, what it does is it creates this culture of excellence. That's the best way to put it. That if if someone's not cutting it, you better figure out how to cut it. You better figure out how to get to the standard that we've set. And if you can't, we're going to try to retrain you. We're going to give you a second chance. But in the end, if we've given you enough chances and we've tried to retrain you, then we'll politely ask you to go somewhere else and do something else because you're still probably great at what you're doing. You just may not be at the level that we need you to be at. And unfortunately, we've had to do that in the organization. But again, I think that's why it creates this culture of excellence. It creates a culture of accountability. So if someone doesn't live up to those standards, again, we ask them to do other things. And then again, the precision. That's the reason why plus or minus 30 seconds is so important.
Yeah, it's good, really good points. There's a handful of buzzwords in there that apply across every single industry and office out there. And accountability is really important. I remember and I know that accountability is brutal from top down, from the boss to the rookie. That level of like lessons learned, AAR, after actions review, that's a hallmark of that culture. And the thick skin to say, okay, I messed this up, I can get better here. Was this right? Was this good enough? Those kind of 360-degree reviews after every single event or mission enforce that and enforcements of that accountability. Really cool.
Yeah, and I think I'll add one rule, and I think it also creates a culture of humility. I think it honestly, and I think we pride ourselves in that. I think we know we're professional, but I think we have enough humility to know that there are times where we may make a mistake, and we want to talk about it so that when we do it again, and maybe we do it live, right? If it was in training, that's where we want to get all of our mistakes out of the way. When it's actually game time, we've at least had the humility to say, "Hey, man, I messed that up, in practice, but I learned from it, so now I'm going to execute to standard." So I think it also adds to that culture as well.
And so you volunteered to join the Army. Of course, you volunteered to go to all those schools that you went to, and to assess and select and get to and become an aviator. You volunteered to be an aviator in the best of the best that has a margin of error, like maybe that. and
Mhm.
and um and this is after you had already had a successful career so far. You'd already done two long deployments, right? What were they?
So I did my first deployment was with the 101st, and it was in Mosul in 2003 in Iraq. And then we came back, and because the Army was going through a change, they changed the unit we were in, which basically just shortened our time at home. So we were at home between the two deployments, I want to say about 11 months total, and we went back for a year. And the time we went back was with 3rd Infantry Division, and we went back to basically the heart of Baghdad. Our unit was responsible for Baghdad and the surrounding areas.
Okay, yeah. So you got a lot of time over flying over the airspace in Baghdad, huh?
A little bit, fair amount. I might have it memorized more than some other areas in in America, because I got a few hours flying around there. Yep.
Yeah, certainly. So talk us through some of those, like your most memorable story as you're flying. It's probably with the 160th. I think we're gonna hit on it, but talk us through something that's noteworthy that you want to share.
Yeah, I'll start out probably with that first one that we talked about with when I was with Third Infantry Division, and it was you know, for from a mission perspective and some of the complexity, it probably wasn't. It certainly was not the most complex mission I've ever been on. From a strategic standpoint and from a if it went wrong standpoint, it was the most important mission I think I've ever been on. And the mission was to fly. By then the deposed dictator of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, and transport Saddam Hussein from his holding location to where he was going to trial. And again, not the longest, not the most complex, but if we messed up anything on that mission, to include just having an accident or something of that effect, obviously you can imagine the reverberations in that. So super memorable, super rewarding, and something I'll forever remember for sure, that I had Saddam Hussein in the back of my helicopter.
Yeah, right. So what was that? Was it daytime, nighttime?
No, so yeah, it was a nighttime mission. It's safer at night, right? A little bit harder to see. And again, there was some synchronization required, right? As you can imagine, the planners and the senior leaders that wanted this movement to occur wanted to make sure that it was covered. So we did have to coordinate with Apaches that were providing air cover for anybody that may have wanted to try to shoot at us. There were some other overhead assets that were either doing intelligence, surveillance, or reconnaissance, and providing video feeds to certain operation centers. And then we had to synchronize with the folks that obviously were guarding Saddam Hussein and transporting him. And yeah, so we flew down under the cover of darkness at night, having to navigate through Baghdad. And if you're wearing night vision goggles and you're over a very urban area like Baghdad, it's not as easy as one. You can almost take the night vision goggles off and see better because of how bright everything is. But we landed. I remember landing, and I at some point I thought there was going to be an entourage or something. Maybe I don't know what I envisioned, but I thought it was going to be more than what I saw. I literally saw two nondescript army vehicles pull up kind of out of nowhere, and they walk him out, and you could see obviously who he was. They did have him handcuffed and shackled. They didn't have him hooded like some of the detainees, and they walked him up to our helicopter and put him in. And I can remember our crew chiefs obviously relaying this. I might have took a peek over my shoulder to see what was going on, just to lay eyes on person. And yeah, he put on a seatbelt pretty well. So somehow he had been in a Black Hawk before. I don't know when, but or he could just figure it out, or some seatbelt. But I think he had an easier time putting the seatbelt on than some of his guards. But yeah, we lifted off, took off to the route. And the reason we were flying, just to back up, was because it was safer to fly than be on the ground. And the leadership assessed that it would be easier and safer to transport him. So again, it was probably a short 5-minute route over to where it's called the Green Zone in Baghdad, where they had a lot of the government buildings and U.S. embassies and whatnot. And we landed there, and again, two more descript army vehicles came, picked him up, and drove him away. And it wasn't until we lifted off that kind of the gravity of the moment, right? You're so focused on making sure everything's right, and that you're not, you're on time, you're talking to everybody you need to talk to. But after we lifted off and started to fly away, we all started talking to each other on our intercom system, and about how cool it was that we just had, again, Saddam Hussein in the back of our helicopter. So very memorable event, for sure, for everybody involved.
I bet. Yeah, I mean, what a dynamic time in our nation's history. A lot of veterans have spent time there, and your ability to support in those strategic ways prior to going to a unit that was designed to take on the most strategic missions. So then from there you went on to the Night Stalkers, and did some very important, challenging things, right?
Oh yeah.
So you had a lot of a lot going on in your, in your professional life, right? The wars back and forth, long deployments. You're seeing people come and go. You get to the 160th, and there's some danger there. Like that, like they're training the best of the best to go take the meanest good guys to battle against the meanest bad guys. And now you're getting like you're on the sharpest end of that knife and doing it. So talk us through some experiences with the 160 if you don't mind.
No, again, thanks, Will, for that. You're right, and what we like to say in the 160th is, we train, for these situations. We train in very difficult areas so that when again it's game time, we're confident in our ability. Um, but I'll be honest, there's not much. There's no training scenario in the world that can prepare you for the environment of Afghanistan. It's just the way it is. Of flying, you've been there, you know. It's very difficult. Even some of our terrain here in the mountainous United States pales in comparison to the harsh terrain over there. And then obviously the enemy has a vote. And so yeah, one of the most significant missions I think I was on in the 160th was in Afghanistan, where we had to support the Rangers, right? And if you're familiar with the Ranger Regiment, very very capable organization. They usually go to the target with quite a few people, right? And so it wasn't just a couple Chinooks or Blackhawks. It was an armada, 6 or 7 of us, which is a couple hundred ish, depending on how many Rangers you can put. And I think I told you our joke was when someone asks how many Rangers can fit in a Chinook, it's always one more. So you as many as you could fit, you could probably cube it out. So yeah, it was a mission in Afghanistan, supporting again about 200 Rangers. That was very sporty. I guess I'll just say that and go into more detail if you'd like.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, for everyone's understanding, Rangers are the most lethal raid force in the world. Um, um, Flying on the most capable and well trained and equipped uh, aviation regiment in the world. And the Rangers go in and um, they're gonna bring some scunion is like what we like to say. So um, I'd like you to give the crowd a understanding of the terrain, the 3D terrain of Afghanistan. These mountains are so enormous. They're this enormous. Ground is here. You're
Big.
flying somewhere around here. You almost can't fly higher than the mountains because the oxygen and the atmosphere is so thin up there that you're not able to, you're not able to get ignition on your engines. You'll stall out and crash. So, like, give us how crazy this environment is just from sheer terrain and geography.
Yeah, we always used to like to joke if you've seen the movie Armageddon when they're describing the environment of the comet or whatever that the asteroid that they got to land on, and I think it's Steve Buscemi or whoever the actor is says, okay, pretty much the worst environment imaginable. That's all you had to say. Everybody like that's what we would describe Afghanistan, and you're right. Like you're basically navigating through valleys. Could you fly over some of the ridge lines and peaks? Yes, you could, but not with 30 Rangers in the back of a Chinook. It's you're to your point, the engines just cannot perform no matter how powerful they are. You just don't have the power because of the dense air. And so yeah, so that's it. You're flying in a valley. The ridge lines probably on both sides. They're could be hundreds, if not thousands of feet above where you're at, and the valleys themselves are it's just inhospitable. There might be a couple places. So even if you have an emergency, you're not landing. There's nowhere to land. You're trying to figure out the emergency, and hopefully, especially if you lose an engine, you're trying to make sure that you can get out of that valley on the single engine you have left. What also complicates it is obviously where the enemy likes to put themselves. We had a lot of history in the country, so we had templated where we think the enemy would be, and we knew which valleys were going to be sportier than others. And we would advise the ground force of that because we had the history. The ground force sometimes would rotate over. We'd have pilots who'd flown in those valleys hundreds of times and could tell you what it was going to be like. So yeah, when you're flying, it is like you said, three-dimensional. You might have enemy emplacements above you, below you, parallel to you, and you're trying to navigate that. You're trying not to hit the terrain. It's very dark, even with night vision goggles. There's times where we would have to launch illumination rounds, which are you're familiar, but for the audience, it's basically an artillery round that spits out a round that's burning, so it illuminates the sky, and it has a parachute and it just floats down. We would have to ask for those in order to be able to see enough to be able to either land or navigate the route because it was so dark and there was just no ambient light. So that was the environment we were going to, back to the pretty much the worst environment imaginable.
Yeah, so you're doing a large scale assault mission, half dozen plus helicopters, couple hundred of the meanest good guys in the world, about to go against some of the meanest bad guys in the world, and you're flying at night under goggles, which are almost like that. But
Toilet paper tubes, looking through toilet paper tubes is the
toilet paper
analogy.
tubes, and it's green, so it's green and black, right? So it's not it's amplifying all the ambient light, so you can see a little bit,
Yep.
but completely blacked out, right? Zero lume, and talk us through the overhead assets, and then your move in.
Yep. No, thanks for that. Yeah. So in a significant mission like this, we would have what we call it a stack, and it's literally that. It's a stack of aircraft, probably about every 1,000 feet. Sometimes it might be every 500 feet, depending how many you need. And when it's a significant enough mission, you have quite a few. Sometimes they're AC-130 gunships. Sometimes they're fighter jets. Sometimes they're ISR intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance platforms that are just looking down and seeing. So you name it, and then obviously probably a few drones in there somewhere. And that's what we had. We had that night. We're talking to them. We're trying to synchronize. We're trying to figure out what's going on. We have some people scanning the surrounding areas as well, but it's very difficult. It's finding a needle in a needle stack sometimes when you're looking for the enemy. And when we're approaching that objective that night, obviously they could hear it and they started shooting. The enemy started shooting at us. And it wasn't, for us, we call it the big sky, little bullet theory. So, we just kind of hide in the big sky. We hide under the cover of darkness. And with small arms, it's not as hazardous as some of the heavy machine gun fire or rocket propelled grenades. But they started to get a little bit closer, a little bit out of our comfort zone. So luckily for us, we have on the Chinook, right behind the two pilots, we have two door gunners that are shooting Gatling guns. We call them mini guns that are capable of just spitting out thousands of rounds a minute. That sound very loud when they go off. And then, way back in the back near the ramp, we have two more gunners that are shooting what we call the squad automatic weapons, which are machine guns, belt-fed machine guns. And that's what had to happen. Like our crew chiefs see it, our gunners see it. They see that the fire's getting a little bit close. We're calling out as pilots, and they start servicing those targets. And it's just it's like a symphony, if you will, or a dance. We just keep flying because we want to keep it straight and level so that they can have their sectors of fire. And they'll shoot until the target gets behind them, and then they'll hand off, the rear, the ramp gunners will pick up from there and again provide that suppressive fire. So that was the situation going in. And then as I relayed it to you, we eventually got it to the point where we could finish our approach, but it's not all over, especially in a Chinook. And if anybody's ever ridden on a Chinook, it puts out a lot of rotor wash or been near a Chinook. So that means at about 100 feet, usually anywhere between 75 and 100, depending on the approach, we start kicking up so much dust that we cannot see the landing zone anymore. It's okay. We've practiced it 1,000 times. And so we basically just come inside and we look at our instruments and we continue to fly the approach, down to the ground, listening to our crew chiefs tell us where we're at, making sure we're not going to land on something, and putting us on the ground so that then we can, and what we want to do is get that ground force on the ground so that they can then go execute their mission. and that they could start. And trust me, they want to get out of that box either. They, when they start, because they can do nothing, they can just sit there and become targets like us. So they want to get off as well, and that's our whole goal: get on the ground as quickly as possible, let the ground force get off, and start prosecuting their mission. And we were able to do that quickly after our crew chiefs obviously neutralized the threat.
That's amazing. It sounds like all hell was breaking loose, and the mean good guys started doing what they needed to do.
Yeah, true. And of course the radios are usually going crazy. We jokingly say at what really is like when we're on our approach, typically the radios just go nuts. So we do have ways to isolate those in the helicopter to where we can just hear ourselves, because that's the most important thing, fly the helicopter. But you're right, we were able to get all the helicopters in, put them on the ground. You don't wait for all of the helicopters to offload when your load is when the last man's on the ramp. Our crew chiefs make sure everybody's clear. They tell us we're clear up left and right, and we pull pitch. We try to get out of there. And again, typically the two most dangerous parts of a mission are when you're doing that approach, and then also when you're flying out after that approach. And this was the same on this. The enemy started to hand it to us on this one, not just with machine gun fire. A couple RPGs started to head our way. And there's nothing you could do about those. Those as a helicopter pilot, that's probably one of the most, other than hitting a set of wires that you didn't see, seeing a rocket propelled grenade go off and not really knowing where it's headed, and hoping it doesn't hit your helicopter, just because there is no defense. You can see the flash. After that, you don't see anything, and then you hope again that it just misses you. So we were just trying to get out of there, away from the objective. Plus, we want to clear the area so all of those things that I talked about flying overhead can start pummeling the enemy. Luckily, again, for us, we were able to do that. Flew all the way back, listening for anything. Do we have all of our engines? Is it vibrating more than it normally vibrates? To your point, is it leaking any more than it already leaks? Okay, it's not. Let's get back land. And when we landed, we checked it out, and somehow just one single bullet round had gone through the fuselage, and obviously not hit anything critical. But somehow we lucked out and made it back. And again, we knew it wasn't over, because we had to go back into either that same area or have the ground force maneuver a little bit to where we were going to have to go back in and pick them up when they were done with their mission. So that was just the first part of the mission. Luckily, the ground force took care of that area to where when we had to go exfil, it was a little bit more benign. Let's put it that way.
It was quieter. They tamed the beast.
Yeah.
So hearing you say your good door gunners had to service the objective, that's a new take of customer service, like military style.
We're here to serve. That's right.
The good guys and the bad guys. They're right on. Well, that's quite a story. Thanks for sharing that with you. Those are a lot of people say that's hard, that's scary, that's challenging, and yes, all that. But you were ready for it. You guys trained for it. You were prepared. You had the best teammates. You had the best procedures, standards. Now you're transitioning into, we're gonna run a little bit long today. It's okay if you gotta bump off anybody, do it, no big deal. But I want to get this in. This is important. You're taking these skill sets that were decades in the making, and you're gonna transition them into corporate America. That precision, the communication, collaboration, teamwork, small unit dynamics, the coaching, mentor, leading. You're gonna take these intangible things that are honed to the precise degree, and you're gonna transfer that into a corporate environment. What does that look like to you? What does that transition and then the corporate environment look like to you?
No, thanks again for that, Will. So, I'd be lying to you if I said that transition was a lot of fun. So I've been going through it for a few months now, and I think all of us can attest to that. If you're on the other side now. Let's put it this way: I've never met any veteran that's been like, "Man, that transition was a blast. I really enjoyed that." So I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot in the last few months. Like I said, I'm 8 days from being retired. I think what I think I've discovered about myself is that a lot of the things that I was able to apply and become, improve my, myself at in the military, there are roles in the civilian sector that I could perform the same way, right? That whether and it's again, it goes back to what we talked about, the customer service aspect of it, from a 160th perspective, and being able to communicate, being able to listen to what the needs are of your customer, and then figure out how your unique element can support that. I've been doing that my entire career. And then like we talked about, the leadership, whether or not it's formal structured leadership like we have in the military, or we also have a lot of informal leadership when you're put in charge of a project where it's a cross-functional team, and you may not even be the one person that was, that had the tail pinned on you as the leader of the project, but you realize you got to step up and you got to start getting people to work towards a common goal. I think a lot of those things translate very well. And again, that's why I'm excited, because I think, yes, it's a transition. It'll be much different than what we had in the military, but to some extent, what I'm hearing from a lot of the folks that have gone before me is there are a lot of similarities in the roles that we had in the military, and ones that we can find in the civilian sector.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're nailing it. There's a ton of corollaries, different environments, different arena, but it's the same skills that's going to make you successful in the next round. That's wonderful. Okay. So we're gonna slowly start to wrap this up, but, in a few words, what do you like doing in your free time? Before you answer that, I'm gonna say to the audience, hey, we're gonna have a brief opportunity to dialogue. If you had a question or comments, be ready. First, he's going to tell us what he likes doing in his free time. May surprise, may not. Go for it.
Thanks, Will. So yeah, I mean, I had 3 kids. So what I like doing in my free time, I don't get to do a lot because I'm a unpaid Uber driver for them, for the most part. But I like to run. I like to read books when I can run. As mentioned, I play hockey, not well, but I play and referee again when I can, when the ailments of being in the military aren't bothering me that much. And then, like a lot of us, anything outdoors. I probably wouldn't, even though I was a pilot, and I didn't have to stay in a tent or sleep in the field as much as some. I do enjoy the outdoors, right? I probably wouldn't have stayed in the Army as long as I did if I didn't enjoy the outdoors. So just getting out and going hiking, things like that, I really enjoy.
And I said, we got Cal, you got a question here. Go for it.
Well, a couple things if I can. So Colonel Kirk, first, for those that aren't aware, an individual in leadership position which you operated in the organizations you worked professionally is the equivalent in the civilian space of being a C-suite manager at a kind of upper mid to kind of national level type of organization, or CEO of a mid-cap organization. It takes that type of organizational abilities, certainly leadership capabilities, but also understanding of his business, his customer, and the service delivery model that he operates. He was just operating the most lethal soldiers we had to the most hostile environments you can imagine, and quite frankly, more than you can imagine. So for our civilian counterparts on the call, that's kind of the role that he played. I would also like to say, Colonel Kirk, thank you. I did a fair amount of time on the Navy equivalent of the 46, right? But did find my keister on a 47, and I was told by the crew chief on the 47, it's okay, because there was a puddle underneath it. It's okay. If it's leaking, it means there's fluids. So right. That's good. We just got to be concerned if it stops leaking. That's more concerning. And a squadron called Evil Eyes, which is a Marine squadron. They had an Evil Eyes on their nose cone. About 18 aircraft took us in from 4 amphibious ships into Pasni, Pakistan, and then ultimately into Camp Rhino and then Kandahar, were our operating locations. So that was my foray in kind of the flight of the Valkyries over the water, over the beachhead into danger. I've never had the opportunity to thank one of those pilots, so thank you. In fact, we had some folks that were pinned up and in dire need. And it was two Chinooks that came in and took a mission they probably shouldn't have, to go to an altitude they shouldn't have, to get these folks out and save their lives. So for me, for so many of those that you have served, probably many of them you'll never meet or know, thank you for what you did, your heroism and the group.
Thank you, Carl. Appreciate that. Thanks.
I would like to call out from you the value of the enlisted corps that served within your units. I am of the strong opinion that the enlisted are the backbone of our military, not the officer corps. And individuals like yourself, with your pedigree and experience, will find some opportunity in their civilian transition. But it is the enlisted who truly need the greatest support and understanding in translating their experiences, their skill sets into civilian careers. Can you speak a little bit in your squadron, 160th, that is a high tempo, high grade, elite unit, the value of the enlisted and their skill sets and what they brought to the mission, and where you think that translates into civilian careers?
Yeah, thanks for that, Colin. Thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that, and your service. Thanks again. Yeah, just for everyone who isn't familiar, I would say 75% of most any organization in the military, certainly in the Army and in the 160th, is the enlisted force. So nothing gets done, literally nothing. And you're right. It's where the rubber meets the road. It's the backbone. All the analogies that you hear are there for a reason. Because again, the ideas maybe, or the guidance or the intent that the commanders have, go nowhere without the enlisted force executing them. For us, and the other thing I mentioned about the 160th is we empower subordinate leaders within whatever their range of experience is to make decisions and to conduct missions without having to ask for permission. We may give guidance and intent, and then and they execute. So it's the same with the enlisted force inside the 160th. Again, you name it, across all functions of an organization: human resources, intelligence, operations, supply chain, certainly maintenance. Like, you want to talk about combat multiplier is what we like to call them. Our maintainers in the 160th, like when we build up a Chinook, if you guys aren't familiar, we transport the Chinooks via C-17s because we have to get there rapidly. We tear them down, we put them in C-17s, we have a bunch of carts, we put the big things on, we put the rotor blades on the inside, we fly them all the way over halfway around the world, we pull them off, we build them back up, we go fly a mission. I've seen, and it's the people doing that are all enlisted folks doing that. From senior non-commissioned officers, sergeants, to some of the younger folks that just came in, and I've seen them, tear apart a Chinook very competently. It sounds like I'm saying break it in 4 hours and build it back up in maybe 8 hours on the other side, because of their competence, their motivation, and their desire just to get things done. So to that end, I'm confident, certainly, that any enlisted member that had success in the 160th, if I owned my own company and they said I was in the 160th, and and here's the things I did, and I obviously demonstrated success, I'd hire them in a heartbeat. I don't even know what job it would be. I would hire them because I know they'd figure it out. And I think the best words that I've heard from most of the enlisted folks is when I ask them if they could do something, can we do this, can we do that? Typically the answers from most of the folks in the 160th is too easy, sir, or yep, sir, we got you, sir. No questions, got it. And then you're going to go out, they're going to do whatever you ask them to do, and you're going to get a great product in return. So, and that's not just in the 160th, that's writ large. And again, I would say that, if for anybody on this call that's looking to hire and looking to hire military, you're not going to get a more dedicated, hardworking person than the non-commissioned officers and the enlisted folks in the military that have proven themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right on. Thanks, Cal, for that question. We're in the respect of people's time and their lunch break. Really appreciate your time, Chris, coming out and meeting with us. To our friends in the audience, hope this Patriot lunch has provided you an opportunity to, have a small group dialogue, learn, understand the quality of the transitioning veterans into your arenas, into your workforce. Chris freely chose to dedicate his life to serve and sacrifice. And for that, we're very grateful. Chris, thank you for your service.
Thanks, Will. Thank you guys, and thanks everybody on the call that either supported or served or just even being participating in this. I truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. Feel free, please, everyone, to reach out to Chris, to Colonel Kirk. We're gonna I'll send out a follow-up note with a replay link so you can look, and also his contact info, so you can better understand the roles and the industries that he's looking at joining. So stay tuned for the next Patriot Lunch, which is currently scheduled for Thursday, August 22nd. Feel free to forward these invites always out to your company and your network, your veterans resource groups. Share the good news of these veterans that are transitioning out. Hope you had a great time. Looking forward to seeing you all later in August.